Díomh a cáride agus fáilte rais. Hello friends and welcome back to the Cream Cree podcast. It's Elaine. I am Elaine Doyle and it is with deep, heartfelt gratitude that I welcome you back to this sacred space. Hello everyone. How are you getting on? Yeah, I really hope everyone is keeping well at this very momentous and intense and magical time on planet Earth. What a time to be alive. Yeah, really hope you're well and sending you love from the sacred lands of Eru here in Ireland, wherever you are in the world. And I'm really excited to be back recording an episode. It's been a while. I've been pumping all of my energy into my website and my new body of work, Triple Spiral Healing, which I launched last month, which was just years in the making. For anyone who works for themselves, you'll know how much background work goes into birthing something. So all my free time really has been doing that. So apologies, I've been MIA, but here today to talk about something, as I said, I've wanted to speak about for ages, which is bleeding women, the sacred blood of life that is released from women every month, menstrual cycle awareness, basically the female reproductive system. And this episode I really want to emphasize is for both men and women. We need the men to understand our menstrual cycle, especially for men out there who want to raise their daughters consciously and who want to be in a relationship with a awake and conscious woman. It's really, really important that the men get this education and understanding of the power and wisdom that is contained within the female menstrual cycle. So welcoming both men and women here, grandmothers, mothers, fathers, grandfathers, who want to be able to support the women in their lives to be deeply connected to their womb and their menstrual cycle. So that is going to be today's topic. And before we dig in, I'm just going to, invite us all to just take a deep breath now. In through the nose and out through the mouth. Allowing yourself to land fully into your heart space now. Taking that sacred journey from your head down into your heart space. The portal to your soul and to God and Goddess, source energy. And tuning into your intention for this space and time together. Maybe it's to come into deeper presence and receptivity. And just allowing yourself to be present to receive that which your soul came to receive here. Tommy McCree and Ish. I am in my heart space now. So here we are. It is the 10th of April, 2024. In Ireland, we are apparently it's going to be the summer in a few weeks, but it definitely doesn't feel like that here in Ireland. There's a lot of wind and rain, and I feel like it's really calling us into deeper nourishment and self-care within. That external yang energy hasn't fully arrived here, I don't feel yet. It's calling us just more nourishment at home, more solitude, more inwards kind of reflective time. It'll be, the sun will come back, the winds will die down, but till then we surrender. And it's an important thing to talk about before we get into menstrual cycle awareness and menstruation and blood, because that whole topic, as you will see, is about honouring the seasons, our internal seasons as women. And the external seasons show us the way with that. Okay, which I'll explain more. But for example, when a woman is bleeding, that is seen as her inner winter, where she hibernates and goes inwards. And in the external seasons, we have winter, and winter is a time where the leaves fall away and plants and trees die to be reborn in the springtime. So when we talk about menstrual cycle awareness, it's really learning from the external seasons in nature. Okay, so let's just get down to some educational basics here, okay? Because it's really important to start with the basics, because a lot of us, especially in Ireland, and I can only speak from my own experience, we did not get proper education about this. It was so much shame built around it. And because I'm actually very, very connected to my blood, menstruation, in the matrix it's called period. I really don't like to use that word because it actually means periodically ill. So moving away from that word to use the time of the month where I bleed or I menstruate, I feel like that's very important for women to reclaim the blood. I'm bleeding. It's not a period, I'm bleeding. Okay, so we didn't get a lot of education growing up about it. So much shame around it. This concept of it being dirty, which really makes me very angry and upset now as I see how much power there is related to our blood. But it's important to talk about that. That is a fact in the mainstream now. I know it's becoming more acceptable. I remember being in my local centre a couple of months ago, and I think it was BFM. There was a man and woman were on talking about it, and how they were talking about it in relation to sport, and perhaps when women are bleeding, it's not a time for loads of physical activity. And I was like, wow, this is the new word. Wow. So it is becoming, the shame is lifting, but I'm still really saddened when I'm in groups of women and I hear women talk about the nuisance of the monthly bleed. It really saddens me because it is a gateway to our power. And so we've much work to do yet to spread this message, I feel. And I feel like I probably need to record a few episodes on this. So maybe perhaps this is part 1. Let's see how much comes through today. I actually slightly feel overwhelmed because there's so much on this. And because I'm so deep in it, I it's hard for me to even put it into words sometimes. But hopefully enough comes through for people to really get something from this today. Okay, so coming back to the basics, what is a woman's menstrual cycle? So a woman's menstrual cycle is her reproductive system. It's the cycle of her womb, which obviously is the place where human life is conceived and birthed through the birth canal. So that is what the menstrual cycle is. It's the female reproductive system, and it's a monthly cycle. Okay, so the menstrual cycle for women can be anything from 21 days, every 21 days, to every 35 days. So depending, it will vary for each woman. The average cycle is a 28-day cycle. So I'm going to just focus on a 28-day cycle. So, and when you look at like animals and nature, you know, animals are the same. They have like a certain amount of time. Well, like let's take nature for example. Yeah, it's like the most fertile time for the land is around Beoutna and coming up to the summer solstice. So it's a yearly cycle, and a woman's is a monthly cycle. So everything in nature is cyclical, is what I'm trying to say. And yeah, there's a lot of information out there around how it perhaps wasn't monthly forever, but modern things have made it more regular for women. But that's not a topic for today. Anyways, so it's a monthly cycle. It starts on day 1, and day 1 is the first day of the bleed. Okay, so that's where we say, okay, this is day 1 of my menstrual cycle, first day of my blood. And, you know, women can bleed anything from 2 to 7 days. And that is known as the inner winter. Okay, so when we are bleeding, it's our inner winter. And then we move into our inner spring, which is when we're starting to come out of the womb temple and come into the rebirth of our new selves after the shedding and dying away of at the time of the bleed. And I'll get more into these seasons maybe later on in the episode. Anyway, so we go from our bleeding from our inner winter to our inner spring. And we go from spring then to our inner summer, which is our time of ovulation. So we usually ovulate around day 14 if we're running on a 28-day cycle. You'll know how long your cycle is by tracking it. When's the last time I bled? Okay, I bled 3 weeks ago. Okay, I'm bleeding again. I've got a 22-day cycle. So women need to keep track of that to know how long their cycle is. So anyways, we ovulate 2 weeks before our bleed arrives. So if you bleed on day 23, okay, you take 2 weeks from that, and that is the approximate time of when you're ovulating. What is ovulation? Ovulation is when the egg is released from the fallopian tube down into the uterus. Okay? And as I said, this is after your bleed, perhaps around day 14, depending on the length of your cycle. So the egg is released. And if conception doesn't occur, as in if sperm doesn't meet the egg to conceive, the egg, along with the lining of the uterus, is shed. So the blood that is released during a woman's menstruation is the lining of the womb. So what happens is, when during inner spring, and when the egg is coming down into the uterus, the lining of the womb, the uterus, prepares for conception. So if conception occurs, if the sperm and the egg unite, that embeds itself into the uterus of the womb, and it's the uterus, the lining of the uterus, that helps the baby grow. It creates life, the lining of the uterus, okay? But if conception doesn't occur, the lining of the uterus sheds along with the tiny little egg. But that's not what the blood is. The blood is the lining of the uterus, and it's shed on day 20, or on around day 28, day 29. It's shed. So after the uterus, after ovulation, before the lining of the uterus is shed, we move from inner summer, which is ovulation, into inner autumn. And that's the time where the lining of the uterus is preparing to be shed. So we're on the descent back into winter, and that's called our inner autumn, and then we move back to our inner winter again, and the cycle starts all over again. So just to say it again, it's the process of the egg being released for new life, and if sexual intercourse doesn't happen, it is released. So every month this happens. There is an opportunity for a woman and a man to conceive, to have conception once a month. And if it doesn't happen, the woman bleeds. So that is the physical education around the menstrual cycle. That's a very basic education around what's happening. Okay, and as I said, when I was growing up, my mum would have explained it to me, but it was very hush-hush. I didn't really understand it. I just knew I was bleeding every month, and I had to wear pads or whatever. Like, there wasn't much else. There was nothing in school. It was not seen as something sacred and spiritual and powerful and a gateway to so much healing. And that's really what I want to talk about today, is how a deep connection with our womb, our menstrual cycle, our menstruation, our blood, as women, is the gateway to deep sovereignty, deep healing, and deep power. Yeah, as women, it's actually utilizing our cycle, our menstrual cycle, and our blood as our spiritual practice. Okay? And I'll go deeper into how I utilize it as my spiritual practice. And depending on your circumstances in life, how busy you are and how much support you have in your life, it will look different for each woman as to how you can really utilize it, depending on how much free time and spaciousness and support you have. So there's no right or wrong here way of being with our sacred blood, of being connected to our menstrual cycle. But we have to start somewhere, and we have to start with the awareness of the sacredness of it, and awareness of how we can deepen our connection with our womb and our cycle. It's really important at this time, because this new earth, this time of awakening, it's all about the rise of the divine feminine, and not just within women, but within man and woman. And we can't talk about the divine feminine energy and not talk about the womb and the menstrual cycle. Like, you can't, because the womb is the physical manifestation of the divine feminine. It is the portal to the goddess, to the cosmic womb, to the creation of all of life. It is a temple that calls in the spirits of the babies. It's where the soul comes into the physical world. So it is the portal to the stars, to the heavens, as I said, to the cosmic womb, to the earth beneath us. It is the most magical vessel we have. And I know in the Rose lineage, it is seen as the Holy Grail, or the chalice. You know, there was this search for the Holy Grail that was used at the Last Supper. And a lot of the teachings of the Rose lineage, the divine feminine Christed path, it's the womb is seen as the holy chalice that contains the blood of life. And when we look at the blood that is released from a woman's yoni, there is really not a elixir out there that is more sacred. Because that lining of that womb creates every man and woman. It's the most, like, if you're into energy and high vibrational energy, okay, the blood is the highest vibrational frequency on the planet. One of the highest. You know, other high vibrational liquids or elixirs are water. But this creates all of life. The blood creates all of life. And I remember Teal Swan watching a video that Teal Swan did about blood and periods, and she talked about how, like, into the future, women's menstrual blood is going to be used to cure things because it's so high vibrational. And if I ever have cuts or anything like that, I will use my blood because it's such a healing elixir. I might keep some of my practices till episode 2 of what I do with my blood, because it might be a bit too overwhelming to go straight into that for everybody if you're, depending where you're at on your path with periods and menstruation and blood. And it's taken me, I suppose it's years of connecting with my womb to get to this path where I now completely block out my diary, turn my phone off, and do absolutely nothing when I'm bleeding other than practices, meditation, you know, spiritual practices that help me deeply connect to my womb. And I'm going to read something out. I'll get to that in a minute, actually. There's a reference here I want to read out. So, yes, like, it is, you know, when people are talking about, like, miracles, or, oh, I need a miracle, and do miracles happen? And I'm like, the fact that we've forgotten that a man's sperm entering a woman and conceiving a child and a baby growing in the womb space, we've forgotten that that is a miracle. Miracles are happening all the time on planet Earth, but we've been severed from them and we've forgotten the magic. Okay, so we need to remember the magic. Like, my friend Elise is pregnant at the moment, and I just cannot get over the fact that there's a baby growing in her womb. It's the most magical thing for us as humans to be able to do. Like, it's just remembering the sacred magic that we as humans can create other humans. And we need to remember that. We need to come back to our divine nature. And the more conscious we are of the sacredness of life, the more consciousness we are of our cycle and our womb and of sex, the more effortless these things will happen for us, and the better chance we're given the souls coming in now. You know, there's so many women now struggling to conceive or having issues with their bleed or their cycle, and I really believe it's because they've no connection to their womb. No connection. Yeah, we're like, oh, I just want to get pregnant. It's like, well, maybe we need to start connecting to your cycle and to your womb. And a lot of the women that I've worked with over the years have conceived in weeks and months after we've done some basic womb connection work. And I'm going to go more into this work when I birth myself. I feel like I need to birth first before I talk about it a lot, but I think a lot of the stuff that fertility, what's the word? IVF, fertility businesses or practices are putting out there is unethical, and a lot of them would go out of business if women really start to connect to their womb. And we need the men to be able to support us with this, right? When I started dating my most recent partner, and he was on the pat and is awake, I made him watch Teal Swan's YouTube video on periods. I'd really recommend that, women, if the men in your life haven't a clue, get him to maybe start off with that. Maybe get him to listen to this. I got him to sit down and watch it a few times. She talks about how sacred it is, how high vibrational the blood is, and how much of a sacred time it is for women. So I was like, I need you to understand this, because when I'm bleeding, I need you to cook and clean and support me so I don't have to do anything. And he was so ready for that. And you know, there was times where he would know, you're going to bleed tomorrow, because I can tell you're starting to get really tired and irritable, and I can see you're about to bleed. So he was tuning into the power of my cycle as well, by seeing into my own inner seasons. And my time of release when I bled was also a time for him to release. You know, we don't just release the blood for ourselves, we release it for the people around us. I'll get more into what I mean by releasing the blood as the episode goes on. But I suppose my main intention right now is to shed all of the shame and uncleanliness of the bleed. We need to clear that. And we need to remember, and I'm going to curse here, how fucking sacred of a time this is. Like, the Matrix has completely severed women from their connection to their womb and their blood, through the shame and guilt, and through systems that were built by men who hadn't a clue of the women's cyclical nature. And what I mean is, like, I very nearly went back into the day job last year. You might have remembered, I kind of mentioned hints of it last year in one of my episodes. And because I love social work. I love working with people who can't afford this kind of support, you know, through therapy and mentorship, but need the support. So I nearly went back into the day job, and probably the main reason I didn't was because I just couldn't foresee how I could go into work when I was bleeding. I just, you know, there's no such thing yet as menstrual cycle menstruation leave in Ireland, or anywhere probably. If you manage to have got it in your workplace, please contact me and let me know. So for me, because I am very deep on the path connected to my womb and my blood, going back into the day job it just wasn't an option right now. So I have a lot of sympathy for women out there who the system that they're working in, or their family situation that they're in, isn't built for their cyclical nature, where, you know, for a couple of days of the month they just don't want to be doing anything, but that's not possible. And I really honour that, you know. And I think in this new earth, we as women and men need to provide new systems, new workplaces, new businesses that allow women to go into their womb cave and shut off from the world as much as they can. That's why a lot of us now as New Earth leaders are working for themselves, because we have to create systems that allow us to be connected to our womb and to our bodies. So that gets me to the Bible, that I feel like all of us need this book. There's many books out there around menstrual cycle awareness, but this is the best I've come across, and lots of people recommended this to me. So I know it's the Bible in the kind of more conscious communities. And it's called Wild Power. Discover the magic of your menstrual cycle and awaken the feminine path to power. And it's by Alexander Pope and Sanji Hujo Wurlitzer. I'll link it, right? I'll link the book underneath the podcast episode. And it literally is the Bible, as I said. It goes through all of the inner seasons, explains the menstrual cycle and how it is the path to power. Okay? And I just want to read out, they have a whole chapter on the 5 chambers of menstruation. And here they're talking about when a woman is bleeding. Okay? About the only effort we want to exert when you're bleeding is to lift your hand to pop an occasional healthy delight into your mouth, like some decadent Roman emperor. If that isn't possible, women, just drop all pressures on yourself. Time pressures, performances, to-do list, exercise pressures, perfect parenting pressures. It's your day to drift, saunter, wander and be. So in that chapter about menstruation, they really go into how this is a time to stop and pause and enter the menstrual cave or womb, where we can allow the blood to be released. And before I get into that a bit deeper, you know, she does talk about in the book, okay, and one of the authors was a busy mum. Maybe you can't let go that much because there's children there and there's a job. They're like, even do 1%. Even have one bath when you're bleeding, where you allow yourself to connect to your blood and to your womb. So even if you're able to implement 1% of change. And even if you are really busy, because a lot of us are, okay, and I don't like using that word, but there's just, as humans and as mothers and as women, there's a lot to do. It's just a fact. It's about still, no matter how much you're doing, having awareness. This is a really sacred time for me as a woman. I am bleeding. The blood of life that creates all of life. This is a really sacred time. And she talks about, you know, there's many different women that she makes reference to in this book. And there's one woman who's an engineer and she's out busy every day for work when she's bleeding. But she, you know, I probably should find it, but I won't be able to find it now. And she's up on a ladder with a group of men fixing something, and she feels the blood flowing, you know, out of her. And she just has this ecstasy moment of feeling the power of the blood in that moment. So even if you are busy, we can still really connect in with the sacredness of the blood. just on that, what is the hormone that's released? The feel-good hormone, endorphins, but there's a specific hormone. I'll find it in a minute, right? I should know this. Anyways, it's the love hormone, and it's released when we're making love, when we're touched, so sacred touch, when we're giving birth, and when we're bleeding. Okay, the feel-good hormone, the love hormone it's called. So if we can create enough stillness when we're bleeding, we can tune into these magical endorphins that are being released when we're bleeding. Oxytocin. It's the release of oxytocin, which is also known as the bliss hormone. And the more stillness or the more presence you can bring, the more of that blissful state, the more of those hormones are being released. The busier we are, the more dysregulated our nervous system is, it can mess up our hormones, happy hormones being released like that. So I hope I'm persuading you that this is a very sacred time. Okay, so and this came in for me strongly a couple of years ago. And I'm sure I've talked about this before, but my awakening was to the divine feminine back in 2018. Oh, divine feminine, what is that? I knew that was what was going to bring me more into balance, more into my power, was going to awaken me. And it was in 2019 that I went on a womb wisdom retreat with Neva von Cronin. And she talked about the power of our wombs, and I was like, oh, this is what I'm here to do. Right, so that was in 2019. And it was a year and a half later that I was at a stone circle down in County Kerry. And I had just got my blood had just arrived, it just started bleeding or menstruating. And I was sitting with my back against the stone. And I made a little flower crown for myself. And I sat back against the stone and I was like, oh my God. I had so many memories of other lifetimes come true. And it was like, this is the most holiest of holy times for a woman. This is a time where we must stop and be served by those people in our lives that can nourish us. We must lay back on the altar of menstruation and rest and allow the blood to flow out and be and do nothing and switch off from the world, separate from the world around us. And it was this washing over of this memory, of this remembrance as a woman, as a priestess, as a, because we're all that, like we're all women who have this power. It's not just about being a priestess or a healer and you have to be connected to your womb. Every woman deserves this remembrance and this connection. So there was this remembrance that this is such a sacred time. And it's taken me a long time to unravel from the patriarchal bullshit to actually create enough spaciousness in my life to have my blood, my menstruation and my bleed as a very sacred time. So sometimes we have these remembrances and knowings, and then it can still take a long time to embody it. And for me, unfortunately, it took more time than I would have liked. So I think as a woman right now, you need to be very compassionate to yourself, that it's not our fault that the patriarchy and the matrix ripped us from our wombs, ripped us from our cycles, okay? Just be very compassionate about how long this journey might take. But if your soul is ready, it can happen quite instantaneously as well. And I talked about it briefly on a few episodes where I had no other choice last year but to really deepen my connection to my blood and my menstrual cycle. Yeah, it's that reminder that if we don't deeply honour our cyclical nature, we end up manifesting illnesses or issues with our menstrual cycle. The path of the wounded healer, like, we don't just get away with not being fully connected or devoted to our womb. And we through healing our own connection with our womb, then we can help others connect. So over the years, for me, there's been many layers to... I thought I was really connected, but then my womb was like, no, there's way more connection here needed. And that was a wake-up call I got last year when I started bleeding really frequently. That just wasn't normal for me and my cycle, which is just the biggest blessing now, that wake-up call and that deepening into my menstruation and my cycle as a whole. And it's, I feel like it's... And that's why I didn't want to record this episode, because I was like, I'll do it when I'm even deeper, deeply connected. But that's going to be a journey for me that will happen until my very last bleed, until I reach menopause. So it's like the path of healing and remembrance. It's continuous and it's a lifelong journey. But there is a lot that I've learned that I want to share here. And really it's the remembrance of how sacred this is, and how much it's needed for all of us women to come back to the sacredness and holiness of our cycle, and especially menstruation, because the menstruation is seen as the holiest time, because there's so much power related to that time. Because obviously, ovulation is a very sacred time, but it's we're not always going to conceive during that time, and it is it's a very, very potent time. We can use that conception energy to birth our creations into the world, and the book that I mentioned talks about that. But that energy is easier to be with because we live in a world where we're it's easy to do and be energetic, and that's the time of ovulation. We're giving and we're doing and we're achieving our goals and all of that. But it's the menstruation period of doing nothing that's more difficult, because we're not set up in a system a lot of the time that allows us to do that. So coming into the sacredness of the blood of bleeding women, why do we want to slow down at this time? Why is it so seen as so sacred and so holy? Firstly, let's just think physically about this. There is a part of our womb, which is the lining of our womb, which is being shed. We're literally bleeding. And I used to always say this to my partner: if men was bleeding this much, there'd be such a commotion about it. Seriously. It's like the man flu. I was like, if you knew what this was like, you wouldn't allow me to lift a finger. Because when you're really sensitized, when you're really starting to reconnect with your body and your womb, you realize how big of a deal it is. Like, especially on my first day, where it's the heaviest, I'm like, this is so intense, this is so massive what's happening right now. So on a physical level, it's a lot to be releasing blood from our bodies. So that is number one reason to slow down. And calling on your community and your support or your family to help with the children, or to run your business for a day, or if you can, block out your diary, or if you really need, ring in sick to work. I was talking to a woman about this. She's like, why do you work for yourself? And I said, well, I'm a woman who bleeds. I can't be going into work when I'm bleeding. And she's not on the path at all, right? This was a family connection, let's say. And she was like, oh my God, you're so right. You know, there's a young woman who works with us, and she just be crippled and sometimes has to go home sick during her period, and it's just not right. And like, if I did go back to the day job, I'd definitely be advocating for menstrual cycle leave, or menstruation leave, that's a fact. But anyways, so physically, there's a lot happening. There's blood being released, right? And secondly, it's the repair process that happens during our bleed. So when we are releasing and resting, that's when our whole system can repair itself, if that makes sense. It's like a reset, it's like a holiday. Okay, you're bleeding, come down and rest, and we'll repair your whole system. So I've definitely noticed, like, the more you do nothing when you're bleeding, the more energy you'll have for the rest of your cycle. So for me, it's my favourite time of my cycle because I feel so grounded. The blood really connects me to the earth. It's like the umbilical cord between me and Mother Earth is reignited. So I feel most grounded, and it's like because I'm recovering from fatigue. When I'm menstruating is when I feel most at home, because that's what I really need. I really need a lot of rest right now to recover from so many burnouts. So my blood when I'm bleeding, is my favourite time. I properly can get rid of the to-do list, block out my calendar and my diary, not meet anybody, not talk to anybody, and rest and nourish myself through meditation, sleeping during the day, eating really good foods. Okay, so there's a repair process where you reconnect with the ground of your being when you're bleeding, and there is blood being released for you. So there's those physical aspects of things that are happening that make it very important for you to slow down, so the repair process can happen, and you can honour blood being shed from your system. Okay? So the more esoteric or spiritual practices that are happening when a woman is bleeding, right? So this is an opportunity for you to shed that which no longer serves you through your blood. So it is known that spiritually, the things your heart isn't able to process move down into your womb. And if you connect in with your womb and in with your cycle, you can shed these traumas and emotions through your blood, through conscious awareness. So that's where the sacredness of the blood comes in, which is, this is your opportunity to let die parts of you that no longer fucking serve you. So it's that, you know, in the spiritual world, we're talking about death and rebirth and the crucifixion and the resurrection. And, you know, if you're deeply connected to the seasons, the wheel of the year, it's like Samhain is a time for the death, shedding thoughts and ways and beings that no longer serve you, to be reborn again in the spring, right? But women, we actually get to do that every month, not just once a year. We get to do that every month with our menstrual cycle. So I'm briefly mentioning all these different things. The book goes into detail on all these different things, and I might, you know, as I said, I might do another part 2. We'll see what needs to come true. But so what I do is, depending on how my month has gone and what's come up for me during that month, especially in my inner autumn, the things that need to be shed spiritually, emotionally, will come up in my inner autumn. So the Matrix labels it as PMS, where women are contrary before their cycle. It's actually them tuning into what they're not willing to put up with anymore, that they need to shed during their cycle, so it's not coming forward with them anymore. So I notice with the people in my life, it's like, before I bleed, it's like, do you know what, I'm actually not putting up with that shit anymore. No. And then I'd be like, right, I'm shedding that through this bleed, this concept in my relationships where I've been not in integrity, or I've been putting up with bad behaviour, or I've been attracting trauma bonds, or whatever it is, okay? So that's a very sacred time just before we bleed, because what's coming to the surface is what our higher self wants us to shed. Okay. So in the lead up to our bleed, we can say, okay, these are the things I want to shed along with my blood. You can do this the night before your blood is due, or you can do it, I usually do it the morning my blood has arrived. I'll sit in front of the fire and say, put my hand on my womb and say, with this release of blood, I am releasing any feelings of unworthiness, any wounds of love, any feelings of not being good enough, not being spiritual enough, not being enough. We all have those things, right? We actually have so much wounds of love. We have so much ancestral trauma, social conditioning, that I feel like the only way we can really shed those things is through connecting with our monthly cycle, and specifically our blood, which will help us release all those things. And there is no way I would have birthed the Cray McCree podcast or Triple Spiral Healing without utilising the power of my menstrual cycle. There's just no way. Because connecting with my menstrual cycle helped me clear any feelings of not being good enough. And it also, the most important thing, it probably helped me actually take grounded action. So like, if we're not slowing down during our bleed and we're constantly doing, we're not really taking action that's going to help us birth our soul work or our most aligned divine work. We're just creating for the sake of creating because we feel like we should be doing. You know, we're trapped in the patriarchal loop. When we really slow down, when we take time off, we only have time then. We only have a specific window from our inner spring and our inner summer to actually create something that is absolutely, completely authentic and needed and grounded. So it helps you to birth stuff from a grounded, rooted place rather than this, I should and I need to be doing more. And that can happen in the most spiritual people, you know, creating all this stuff that's just another form of patriarchy, really. And that's, I suppose, what this book is about that I mentioned, Wild Power. Discover the magic of your menstrual cycle to awaken the feminine power. So it's not just about learning how to slow down. It's to utilise your seasons, to utilise your ovulation, to utilise your menstruation. So that brings you into your most powerful, sovereign path as a woman. Holy Yeshua, Holy Magdalene, I could be here all day. So I just need to tune in to see what more needs to be shared on this episode, because there's a lot. There's a lot. And what's just coming true for me now is like, you know, I'm doing a lot of one-to-one work with women again, which I love. And, you know, a lot of the time it's like, I'm not sure, or I don't know what to do here. And I'm like, your womb is the oracle. Your womb is the Noor. And it's like, when we really align ourselves with our womb a lot of things will fall away because, and I wrote a poem about it, I must share it. It's like, and it was my womb speaking. She was like, I am not who you want me to be. I am not going to go along with the norm. I am not going to allow you to do things that aren't in alignment. I am not going to allow you to do and do and do and do all the time. Like, when you align yourself with your womb, it's a very devotional life and path, because you will not do anything that isn't in full alignment. You won't say yes to family things or gatherings that aren't 100% in alignment, because your womb will be like, no, it's not nourished enough. It's not going to nourish and nurture you in the way that I need it to. It's a very devotional path. I had a client recently, and she was deciding on, she was offering more of her soul work on the side, and her womb just was saying no to the structure of how that was happening. And she was like, but I wanted to be yes. And I was like, I know, but your womb has said no. Like, it's and it's not that we don't do the soul work, but it has to be in a more nurturing, nourishing way. Okay, so it's like there was so much I had to say no to last year, because my womb was like, no, it's not nourishing enough. So we have to dissolve the ego with the power of the womb and the love of the heart. And it pays off in the long run. Like, we say no to things, but there are things that aren't really going to lift us higher into the highest timeline. And we need to stop seeking outside of ourselves. The womb is the oracle. The womb, like, we can listen to all the podcasts we want and read all the books. And I know this is a podcast and I'm talking about a book, but what I'm calling you into is a deeper devotion, and that happens just with you in your womb. Because that is the source of all your power as a woman. And as I said, like, we need the men in our lives to understand this, that this is, like, they were born from a vagina and a womb. And the only reason that they were able to be born is that their mother bled every month. This is the creation of all life. You know, we have to honour it. And all these issues that women are having with their time of the month, when they're bleeding, cramps and polycystic ovaries, and I had a cyst in mine. I had lots of different issues because I was disconnected from my womb. Issues conceiving and all, we have to support. The family unit has to come together to support the woman when she's bleeding. And maybe, as I said, that's just a bath where she's not disturbed, or there's meals pre-planned, prepared. So, you know, that's one thing, is having stuff maybe in the freezer, or having all of the foods that you need when you're bleeding. So you're, okay, I'm set up here now for the next few days. I don't need to go anywhere. So yeah, I feel I leave more of exactly what my time of bleeding and release and menstruation looks like, because it's a whole episode in itself. It's a whole episode in itself. So yeah, just tuning in here to see what final words need to come true. So yeah, just to sum up really, I really feel it's time now, as a community, as a nation, as women, as men, that we shed any sort of shame or distortion from the menstrual cycle, especially a woman's period, even though we're getting rid of that word, or blood, or time of month, and reclaim its power and its holiness and its sacredness. And yeah, my prayer for you is that, or for as a collective, because I'm still on that journey to reclaiming more power related to our menstrual cycle, more power related to our blood, the sacred elixir of all of life, to help us come into deeper relationship with the divine, with the divine feminine, specifically with the goddess, with the cosmic womb, with the power of our wombs, that we all come back to this temple of ultimate creativity and power. And how we, and coming home to that, we come home to truer health as women, rest and repair, and allowing us to shed all that no longer serves us, so we can come into the truth of who we are as women, which is creators of all of life. And it's like, if I can create a human being through my ovulation and through my blood, I can create whatever the hell I want in this world. Just remembering, allowing the power of your womb to penetrate your whole body, your mind, your ego specifically as well, to overcome all traumas, allowing the power of your womb to birth you into your highest timeline. So yes, there's lots in it, lots to percolate there. It is a spiritual practice for me that I would never put to the side. It's because it's so physical and so visceral. It's something that always needs to be honored. Things like yoga and meditation. Well, no, meditation is being with the womb, but all these other external practices can go sometimes, but connecting to our womb as women, even when we're postmenopausal, is always there for us. This portal to the spirit world is always available to us as women. Inviting the men to also read this book. They say it at the start of the book. This is a book that it might be helpful for men to read as well, so they understand the power, because I think there's so much for men to learn as well, so they can really support the women in their lives to really surrender into it. Because I think my most recent bleed was the most divine bleed I've ever had, because I'd finally birthed its triple spiral healing, and that's something my wombs wanted for a really long time, so that I was finally able to really surrender and relax and let go, because I'd finally done what she had wanted me to do. And I was really able to, I think the death and the shedding only really occurs through ultimate stillness. You really have to be still to say, okay, I'm really going to shed this. There's that still point that we receive the oxytocin and we receive the love from the divine that pushes out everything that isn't love, So, I'm just excited for my next bleed. I just love it. And I just really want every woman to experience that. And for women and men that are raising daughters and want to do it in a conscious way, I know the authors of this book have a course for parents and how to help their children and the women that they are raising to cross this threshold. Like, when a woman bleeds for the first time, it needs to be a celebration, it needs to be a ceremony, it needs to be explained right, the holiness and sacredness of this. So I know they have a course on their website. I think it's theredschool.com or something like that. Anyways, that is enough musings from me and my womb today. I'm sending you so much love on your healing and remembrance journey. Slán go fóill, bye for now. I will see you in the next episode, and lots of love. Slán go fóill. Go raibh mór.